There's also seats upstairs in the balcony. There's plenty of seats.
Yeah, where's Gregory? Sheriff, where do you?
I don't know.
I need it.
Advice.
Yeah, I didn't know when he came around. Well, it's quiet, so yeah. Shall we start? Go ahead.
Okay. Now we're going to begin in earnest. Louder, she said. Can everyone hear? You can't hear me? Even right here you can't? Oh, they're shaking their heads. No, you can't hear me. Okay, my name is Jane Bolton Brown. I was asked to open this thing up for us, and I think it's just wonderful so many people are here. I'm really thrilled. We hadn't expected this big a crowd, but how nice that all of you are interested in the book. It's great. And we're here today to honor some of the people that helped us out on it. I gave you my name. I was born and brought up here in Cabot, went to school at Cabot High School, and now I'm retired and I live on West Shore Road over near Joe's Pond. So I'm back home, I guess, to stay. Before we get too far into this thing, I have a few announcements I'd like to make. In case you didn't notice when you came up the stairs, up in the back, towards the corner, in this corner, is the Historical Society sign-up table, where if you want to join the Cabot Historical Society, you can do so today. If you need to renew your membership, then you'll do that, and there'll be somebody there to help you with that. Also, over here on this table, you'll see that we have artifacts along here. Some of you had a chance to look at some of the old things that we brought. Some people brought things today. Other things came from the Cabot Historical Society. Some of us had personal things, those of us that worked on the book. And so when you get a chance after the meeting, maybe take a look at some of these things.
I said I would like to.
One thing I'd like you to look at over on the table is the book that Peg Abbott and May Wheeler did back in 1984 on all of the 7 cemeteries here in the town of Cabot. They went through the cemeteries and looked at all the stones and took down epitaphs, names, dates, and so forth, and it's all logged in that book. That happens to be my copy that I've used for reference for the book that we have done. But I think you'd like to look at it perhaps, and we've done some extra work beyond what May and Peg did, so take a look at that if you get a chance. There's one other thing that's near and dear to my heart I'd like to bring to your attention. When we were doing research for this book, I ran across in the contacts, which was a monthly newsletter type of thing that many of you will remember went out to all the military, the boys and girls that served in the military during World War II. And at that time, Paul Hopkins down here ran the hardware store, and Paul had pictures of just about every service person, and they were all displayed in his window. And those pictures eventually ended up, supposedly, with E.H. Nickerson, the minister here at the church at that time, and he was going to put them into an album, and they were going to be kept at the library. We haven't been able to find the album. We'd like to locate it. If anybody has any idea of where that album might be, it would be a very nice prize to recapture and get back to our library. The other thing is, when we're finished here, we're going to have refreshments up at the back of the room. Take time to visit with your friends and look over the book, which we will show you in a few minutes, and have a good afternoon, because we really enjoy having everybody here. Now, my part in this is to tell you a little bit about the building that we're in. It has quite a history. First of all, I opened the meeting with a gavel. It belonged to the Ladies' Club, the Judith Lyford Ladies' Club. Judith Lyford was one of the first inhabitants of Cabot. She was a very early settler. In fact, she and her husband David were the first to be married here in the town of Cabot. And there's kind of an interesting story, I think, that goes along with that. Their marriage was performed by Squire James Morse. And Squire Morse lived up on the hill, up by Danville Hill, near the Center Cemetery, and they had just asked him to be Justice of the Peace. He didn't know anything about being a Justice of the Peace. So he's had a young son, and he said, I've got to perform this wedding. We suspect that it was Judith Heath and David Lyford. We don't know for sure, but if they were the first, this was his first wedding that he was doing. So he said to his young son, I need somebody to practice on, so come with me. And he took him out in the yard, stood him up by a stump, and then he proceeded to go through the wedding. And unfortunately, I don't know exactly about the intellect of this young lad, but anyway, the story goes that he wouldn't marry after that until the stump rotted down. So, but anyway, apparently Judith and David did get married, and they went to live up on West Hill, somewhere in the vicinity, I believe, of the Bothfield. What is the Bothfield farm now? Is that correct? Well, yeah. And they lived on one ridge, and a family by the name of Blanchard, I believe. Am I right in that? They lived on the other side, and so they were going to go through and find they were going to work on their flax. I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. They wanted to work on their flax that they would store during the winter and use for linen later on to make all kinds of clothing and so forth. They had to do everything for themselves. So this afternoon they were working busily, and they had to borrow some equipment, and they borrowed a hatchel. And this is a hatchel. And this thing they drag the flax through, and that takes out some of the impurities and the hard stuff, and so that they can eventually make it into textiles. And so it came time in the evening after they had finished this process, Judith was going to take the hatchel back through the woods, down into the swamp, and back to their neighbors, which she did. She got it home, back to them all right. Then on her return trip, she finds in the middle of her pathway a couple of bear cubs. Well, I'm not sure exactly what the bear cubs meant to her, but apparently she wanted to have them, or one anyway. She grabbed up the one bear cub, and made a beeline for her cabin. She made it to the cabin, threw the bear cub into a corner, and of course the mother bear was tight behind her. She didn't see the mother bear behind her when she grabbed the cub. She just made a beeline. Well, she got into the cabin, okay, and slammed the door and bolted it, and went to the back wall, found the gun that she always kept ready. By that time, of course, David had heard all this commotion. The bear was screaming, the cub was screaming, probably Judith was screaming, I don't know. And he came and got the gun out of the open window in the back of the cabin, came around to the front, shot the bear, eventually shot the bear cub, and went to look for the second one. They really wanted that cub, and they couldn't find it. That one escaped. But this story about Judith Lyford and her daring deed followed down through history. It's in Hemingway's book. You can read it there in Hemingway's Gazetteer. And so this is the lady that the Judith Lyford's Women's Club was named for. So they had a lot to live up to. Now, the Women's Club was actually formed in 1912, and the first president was Gertrude Wells, and May Burbank, who was Dr. Burbank's wife, was vice president. They didn't have a place to meet at that time, so what they did was they met over the old store. It was the Rogers and Wells store, and there was on the third floor was where there was a large hall, probably similar to this one, and that was the Masonic Hall at that time. Later on, the store burned, and they had to find other places. But they did meet there or at each other's homes, and so they were very busy during those years. But one of the projects that they really wanted to complete, if they possibly could, was to build a library. And so they started in raising money for a library. They got $60, and they took it over to Montpelier, deposited it in the bank, and they were on their way. Well, it was about 1914, Old Home Week, and a man by the name of Charles Willey was visiting. Charles Willey had been born in Canada, came down here as a youngster, lived with his parents for a while. They moved away, and he came back to live with his aunt, Mrs. Buchanan. She was the wife of the local carriage maker. He had a carriage factory here in town at the time. And Mr. Marshall was the carriage painter for Mr. Buchanan. And so this young lad, Charles Willey, apprenticed under Mr. Marshall. Well, eventually the carriage factory failed, and he had to go back to Boston. He went to Boston, became known as the best carriage painter in New England, and eventually got tired of that apparently, and he was still a fairly young man when he went to New York and started a business of his own manufacturing paint. He became very successful, came back in 1914, and then it was then that he learned about the ladies' effort to build a library. So he made a proposition. He said, I will give you $2 for every dollar that you earn, but you've got to do it within a year. Well, they thought about it. And please keep in mind that this was the beginning of, it was in 1920, I think, that the women gained the right to vote, and so all of this was probably happening at the time. And so the women took the challenge, and indeed, they raised the money that they needed. So with Willie's gift, they had, at the end of the year, $16,000 to build this building. They started in making the proposals, doing all of the groundwork that was needed. Dr. Burbank was on the committee, and they bought the land. The land that we're sitting on now used to be the old Winooski Hotel until it burned. Burned, I think, in 1914. And so they bought that for $500, and they were in business. However, Mr. Willey didn't live to see the thing started even. He died in 1918 while the thing was in the process. But the ladies thought that since he had been such a good benefactor, they should do something special, and so they did. They named the building Willey Memorial Hall. On March 12, 1921, the ladies held their first meeting in the new building. Now, this was quite an accomplishment. This was quite a building in those days. As you can see, it still is. It's much the same as it used to be. On the first floor, the ladies had their library, a ladies' cloakroom, a kitchen, a dining room, and a club room. And of course, all of those rooms are pretty much used the same now, except that there's no more ladies' club, and I'll tell you about that in a few minutes. But also up here on this floor, it's about the same. A few improvements have been made, but this is where they had movies and dances and held their town meetings. All kinds of things happened up here, including basketball. And the high school, in fact, wanted to be able to have their basketball games here. So while the building was being built, they said they would contribute to have steel ceilings put in downstairs so the plaster wouldn't come down on the ladies' heads. It was done. And this is where, until 1938, when the Methodist Church was renovated to become a gymnasium, this was where all the basketball games took place. Now, I mentioned that town meetings were held here. They were, and in 1944, there was a chimney fire started downstairs on town meeting day, and it roared through and did a great deal of damage to the building. It's a wonder that the building didn't burn down, but I guess the fire department and the people that were here, it was a good thing it was occupied at the time because they were able to put it out. But Eva Perry and Edwin Smith were two of the people that worked very hard to put the building back in order again, redecorating and rebuilding. So the Women's Club remained active for a lot of years, even after the basketball moved out and so forth. In the early years during World War I, they made bundles for Britain. They were way ahead of their time when in 1926 they had a well baby clinic. They had music courses. The school board felt that music was perhaps not very necessary. They couldn't raise money for that, and books and everything too. The ladies did that. They sponsored music courses in the schools, and that was in 1935. They had art exhibits. They exhibited rugs here. They had plays and dances and many, many good times, and I'm sure a lot of us remember those good times here. We all participated back in those years before we had the new gym. And of course, once the new gym was built, then the Methodist Church was no longer needed. And at that time also, the town meetings began to be held at the new gymnasium. Now, I'd like to just read a list of the ladies that have been past presidents. I may not have them all, but I think a lot of you will remember some of these people, and I think we may even have one of them with us here. Mary Rogers, there's Kate Gould, Maud Walbridge, Eva Perry, Bessie Smith, Goldie Hopkins, Abby Orne, Ada Merritt, Lillian Rogers, Marjorie Coyle, Myrtle Barrett, Sadie Laird, Maud Foster, Lois Domi, Adela Pike, Ruth Nickerson, Jenny Donaldson, and Margaret Gould. In the 1950s and 60s, the membership dwindled to the point where the ladies had a hard time getting everybody together. Then in 1971, sadly, they decided that it was maybe time to put their gavel away, and it was disbanded. The Ladies' Club was disbanded. Ownership of this building then went to the town. That was in 1974. The building was mainly used for the library, which is still downstairs, of course, and also the town clerk's office, which was in the basement. They had occasional meetings, but because the building was really not up to code, we had to be careful about that. Then in 1994, which was 20 years after they inherited the building, there was a committee formed in order to decide what they might do to update this building. The committee was Cecilia Golka, Barbara Carpenter, Carlton Domi, and Bob Davis. Now, these people worked very hard deciding what should be done and also finding funding. Funding came eventually from UDAG, the Cabot Revolving Loan Fund, donation from Vermont Historical Society, and the balance, of course, from the taxpayers. That was in 1994 town meeting. And for all of that, the committee's work and everything, here is what was accomplished. The basement area was expanded to include the present town offices, doubling their workspace, and a new fireproof vault was installed. A lift serving all 3 floors, and a new rear entry made the building handicap accessible. There is a new sprinkler system, fire alarm, telephone systems all installed, along with new bathrooms, new windows, new doors, and new front steps. On this floor, there were new balcony supports because the balcony was considered unsafe. Insulation was added to the building. Up until that time, it was almost impossible to keep the building heated. And outside, the building got a new coat of paint. The space formerly occupied by the town clerk has been redecorated and it's now used for meetings. What was the ladies' club rooms, because there are no more meetings of the ladies' group there, they have been redecorated, but they can be used for other meetings. And there's also an extension of the library in that area. So, and also town meetings moved back here after the renovations, and so the town meetings, the town dinners after the town meeting are also held here. The kitchen has been updated. All of these things were done. Now, because of this work that was done to update the building, Willie Memorial Hall now has a new policy which opens it to the public for a modest fee. So I think really the ladies, the ladies of the Judith Lyford Women's Club should be very, very proud of the legacy that they left. And we're very happy that we're bringing out this book here today. So now, I'd like to introduce Amanda Legare, who's going to tell you about the book and the process that we went through. And thank you very much.
Thank you. I know when I did the interviews, my voice was always, you'd hear this, so how old are you? And then you'd hear this little, and then I did, so I think you'll be able to hear me. I'm going to start with a joke because it applies to me. How many Vermonters does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is 5. 1 to change the light bulb and 4 to talk about how good the old one was. This is a happy day for all of us who've been involved with this book, and my task is to tell you how the book came to be. And the idea started about 10 years ago when the Cabot Bicentennial Committee was planning events to celebrate the state's bicentennial, but we also wanted to do something lasting for the town. And we did a very successful bicentennial ball, but we were aware that there were so many older people in the community who had wonderful stories to tell and wonderful memories, and when these people were gone, we would lose those memories. And so we decided to do some kind of a history of Cabot, like a Cabot Remembered. There is a history of Cabot, as Jane mentioned. Hemingway's Gazetteer, John M. Fisher wrote about Cabot, and that he completed that in 1881. We also have a volume by Fred Blodgett called My Generation in Cabot. Both of these are downstairs in the library, and that also made a lot of valuable contributions, but there were a lot of pieces missing. That last one was published in 1951. Now, for some of us, 1950s, that wasn't that long ago. Well, it was 50 years ago. So, that's already history to a lot of those young people up there in the balcony. So we made a long list of people we wanted to interview, and we started raising funds. We did some flea markets, we bought some tape recorders, and we bought supplies, and we got going. Now, Barbara Carpenter, who is where? Barbara? Barbara's way up there in the balcony. Again, stand up so people who don't know you. Barbara had already...
Who doesn't know Barbara?
Well... Barbara had already done some interviews from the past, and that proved very valuable. And Barbara and I and a few other people wrote a grant to the Vermont Folklife Center in Middlebury. And we did get funding from them. We also got guidelines on how to do the oral history. Barbara and I went to a number of conferences, talked to other people who've done histories, and learned from their experiences. In a few minutes, I'm going to introduce Greg Sharrow from that organization. We bought transcribers, and we started to pay people to do the transcriptions, because when you do an interview, some of them were 45 minutes, some of them were 3 hours. You transcribe every single word. Another financial supporter of this project from the very beginning, from the get-go, was Richard Spaulding. Mr. Spaulding is here somewhere. If he could, Mr. Spaulding, would you stand just so we can take a look at you? Thank you. We certainly appreciate all the support we got. We never intended this book to be a scholarly history, although it is certainly filled with dates and hopefully factual information and names. It's also filled with a lot of anecdotal information. And I love the concept, which I think came from the Folklife Center, which is when you do an oral history of a town, you capture the fabric of life of that town. And here are two examples that you'll find in this book that you probably wouldn't find in a history book, but that reflect history. This first one is Donovan Houston, and he was talking about rolling the roads in the winter. And he said, "We were rolling over on Houston Hill in Walden. We carried some grain and hay right on the roller to feed the horses wherever they stopped. Well, we stopped for dinner at Bernier's, and they gave us some beet wine to drink. So we drank some and went out after dinner to roll roads. We went out through the lane and rolled a whole fence down. I guess we had too much beet wine." And then Jenny Donaldson was talking to me about church services, and she said, "We had a milliner in town, Millie McIntyre, who was above Roger's store, and all the ladies used to get a new hat for Easter. And by the way, there's a lot of those hats on display here. Emma Goodell always got a beautiful hat and made sure she came into the Congregational Church late so that we could all see her. It was quite a thing. We all looked forward to seeing her new hat." Doing this book was a slow process, and it continued over the years, and almost all of the interviewing was done by Barbara Carpenter and myself, because we both have to make our income, well, we were only available to work during the winter months, so it was slow. And at the same time, Barbara led the effort to gather all the photographs, and many people, including quite a few in this room, helped us find photographs, and the book is just full of them. The voters of Cabot approved a grant from UDAG funds, and eventually we had about 90 transcribed interviews. And Sue Carpenter, Sue is down here at the very end. Sue stands, just so we can look at you. Sue and I did most of the transcriptions with the help of Elizabeth Hogan Mulligan. Elizabeth is about 2 new mothers in our group. And then Barbara read through every single transcript and did highlights of what was on each page on the front of the transcript, which proved very helpful when we went to write the book. So we had these 3 boxes filled with transcripts and a general idea of the direction we wanted to go in, and we needed someone to pull it all together for us. And this is where Caleb Pitkin enters the picture. Caleb, with a mustache back there. Barbara and Jane Brown and I started writing, and Caleb took our work and basically pounded it into shape. He laid out the book, he put the pictures in places, he worked on the maps, he did an index, he did a glossary, and tried to correct our mistakes. In fact, I think that when you read this and you find any errors, don't call me or Barbara or Jane, just call Caleb at his house. The Cabot Creamery also gave us some funding. I don't know if Roberta McDonald is here or not. And we have cheese from the creamery today, and we also have some cookies from the Culinary Institute, thanks to Fran Voigt. I want to point out that all of the work that was done by Jane Brown and by Barbara Carpenter was done as volunteers. They never took a penny for their efforts. It was really a labor of love for both of them, and obviously the book could not have happened without them. Also, I wanted to say that we were just a group of people interested in this project. We were not associated with the school's efforts. We were not associated with the Cabot Historical Society, although certainly most of us were members. One person who proved invaluable throughout the whole process is a walking history of Cabot, and it's Jenny Donaldson, who is right here. I believe we interviewed Jenny 5 times. We just couldn't get enough. And I know if anyone's going to make corrections on this book, my phone's going to be ringing off the hook from Jenny. Many others helped with the book, Irma Perry, and hopefully they're all mentioned in the book's acknowledgement in the front, and we thank you all. I want to wrap this up by saying that I have lived in Vermont for 30 years, so I am still from away, but I continue to be struck by how so many people in Cabot stayed in the area. And I made a chart of 45 different people that we interviewed, and I connected them by either direct blood relations or marriage. And did you know that you're all related to each other? I'll end by saying that when you do a book like this, you're never finished. There's always someone else you want to interview. Someone finds a diary in the attic. Someone's great aunt has a bunch of clippings. You're never finished. You have to draw the line somewhere. Making this book happen was like putting a gigantic jigsaw puzzle together. We slowly found the pieces, but we didn't find all of the pieces. And we also found a lot of extra pieces, which is why Barbara and Jane and I are already pondering a sequel. Because of the financial support we've received for this book, and because we're not a for-profit effort, the Cabot Oral History Committee has decided to give everybody that we interviewed a free book. And so what I'm going to do now is introduce Gregory Sharrow, who is the Director of Education at the Vermont Folklife Center. And Mr. Gregory has a doctorate in folklore and folklife. He's going to say a few words, and then he's going to read the names of the people we interviewed in alphabetical order. So when you hear your name, if you will please stand, and Jane and I will bring you a book. And thank you very much for this great turnout. It's very nice.
Like Amanda, I have a voice that I think you'll probably be able to hear. I'm a former fourth grade teacher, so I just have a couple of points I want to make about oral history. Oh, what's happening? Oh, the arc. The first one has to do with folklore and folklife. I wanted to talk about it briefly because that's the link between the Folklife Center and this project, and also for a personal reason. So an anecdote. I grew up in Indiana, northern Indiana, in an area that was settled by Vermonters in the 1830s, including my family, which came from Vermont to this area in 1836. My family is still there. I'm the only one who's away. And each year when I go back, my mother has a new troop of people. She's 83, my father's 90. New troop of people she wants to introduce her, vagabond son to. And of course she wants to tell them that I have a PhD. But she cannot bring herself to say that it is a PhD in folklore. She has to turn me out as a cultural anthropologist or something that sounds seriously. My brother, who's 11 years my senior, is always delighted in tormenting me. And that relationship stays reasonably intact today. One of his things he likes to say to me is that true or is it folklore? But my point here, as an academic folklorist, the point that I want to make is that the Folklife Center, my work as a folklife researcher, my work as a folklorist, is all about documenting the terms that you, thank you very much, used, fabric of life, in the past and in the present. That's what my organization is all about. And that's what oral history captures best, the most intimate, the most personal details of what it has been like, in this case, to live here in Cabot. Another point, again, a personal anecdote. The household I grew up in, I shared with my grandmother. So during the years that I was growing up, I heard a lot about her experiences living in this little town. And I like to say that for me, the landscape that I grew up in was a living landscape, alive with stories. Because we'd come to a particular intersection and there'd be a series of things that had taken place there that my grandmother hung on that particular spot and that she'd talk about from time to time. So I feel that having had this experience of growing up with this lush tapestry of memory, it developed for me a very strong sense of place, which again is another thing that oral history is all about. A sense of place, a sense of connection to place across time through stories that make this landscape, the Cabot landscape, a living landscape. And finally, a colleague of mine, not a folklorist, so his mother doesn't have any problems, an historian, Michael Frisch, who teaches at the university at SUNY Buffalo. He each year has kids do some kind of outreach, oral history type project, and he talks about how one year one of his students decided to do a project that had to do with the Great Depression. She went out into the countryside around Buffalo and wanted to document deprivation during the Depression years. And in first, second, third interview, when she started talking to people, they said, well, you know, we never had anything, really. We never had any money, but we lived on a farm, so we always had our living. And we barely noticed the Depression. Now, that isn't everybody's story, but that was the story this girl was running into. But, they'd say, the influenza epidemic of 1917, 1918, now that was a horror story. So here was this young woman who thought she knew what her project was about, thought she knew what she was going to find out about. But when she got out and started doing this research, she ended up reformulating her project and going in another direction. And that's, again, the power of oral history, because oral history turns to people, in this case, turned to you folks and said, what was this about living here in Cabot? Oral history is a process of discovery, a way to create really an authentic people's history. And of course, in order to do this, you've got to talk to a lot of people so that you can see the patterns and distinguish what has to do with a specific individual and what is broadly shared within a community. And that's the beauty of what you did. You talked to a lot of people, you gave people plenty of time to talk so that you could see how people's stories overlapped and what was part of the common experience of people who lived here in Cabot. So, you know, the Folklife Center's grants, we give around each year. They're tiny, minuscule amounts of money in the world of grant giving. But our idea is to stimulate this kind of activity, oral history research. It's a tremendous honor for us to have been involved in this project, to have had a role here. And I congratulate you on a job very, very well done. Good work. And now for the list. So, you want people to stand as I read their names?
If they're able.
Okay. Knight Abbott.
Some of them may not be here. Okay, he's not here.
Pearl Alexander. Bessie Walbridge Bean. Wesson.
Give to Spud. Yeah, why don't you give her one?
Spud is out there. Wesson Bolton. Roberta and Walter Bothfeld. For Doc Caffin, Steph Bushy. Barbara Carpenter. Irene Carroll. Dwight Clark. Doris Stone Clark. Jesse Gamblin Davis.
One of the presidents of the Ladies Club.
Bob Davis.
He didn't come, I don't think, yeah.
Carlton and Marvy Domi.
Jane, Marty's way back there.
Where is she? Oh, there she
Lois Domi. Jenny Smith Donaldson. Franny Foster. Sally and Walt Goodrich.
I don't think they made it.
No,
Farmers.
they're out milking. Catherine Walker Hay. I guess not at this hour.
No, she didn't. Okay.
Hap Hayward.
That's not here.
For Donovan Houston, Myra Houston. Blanche Labrie Lamore. Frida Maynard Stone Leonard. Lola Lovely. Jane Coyle McKay. Morris Morey. Buggy Morse. Irene Talbert Payne. Oh! For Gus Perry, Irma Perry. Earl Pike. No. For Ken Rogers, Joyce Rogers. June Ennis Sargent. Krista Schultz. Helen Wheeler Smith. Ah, here we go. You want to scoot by? Leonard Spencer. In the back there. Arnold Tebbets. Russ Terrian. Harry Thompson. Howard Walbridge. Roger Walker. Franny Wheeler.
That's Francie's.
May Walbridge Wheeler. And last but not least, Betty Walker Wilkinson.
That's it. Thank you all very much. There'll be refreshments in the back, and Serena's going to be up here selling books, and I hope you'll have time to visit with your old neighbors, and thanks so much for coming.